One of Those Afterlives by Jane Sheffs. Edgar floated through the sunlit corridors, feeling depressed. He had lived a short but terrible life. First, his father had made him work harder than a slave from the age of 5, and then he was married off to a harpy. Not only did she act like one, she also looked like one. And finally, as if this was not enough, he was accused of stealing the apples. His own apples. He had planted the tree 3 years before, but the Duke had claimed that it was a ducal tree because of some land law or something. Edgar thought death would be a release, but he was wrong. As they hanged him in the palace courtyard, he fell right through the noose to spend eternity as a ghost. He tried to leave the palace, but whenever he reached the outer walls, they became solid and unpassable. Stuck as a ghost, he decided to have some fun. He whispered in the Duke's ear until it drove him mad, thus fulfilling the last dream he had had while still alive. But he hadn't thought it through. The Duke may have become mad, but he was still a Duke, which meant that he could wreak havoc. And he did so by setting fire to several villages, raising taxes to insane levels. Fortunately, the Duke died of the most usual cause of death for dukes, poison in his wine. And even more fortunately, he didn't come back as a ghost. But Edgar had no idea what to do next. For 2 centuries he made wailing noises in the palace attic to keep people out, and when he got too bored, he would float around the palace, blowing out candles at random. After a fire, the ruins of the palace stood empty for another century. Edgar thought this was bad, but then the palace was repaired and, wait for it, turned into a school with real children. And these children weren't like the children of his time. They had no respect for anything supernatural. When he tried to whisper in their ears, they called him the draft. When he ran his hands through them, they complained of chills without a hint of fear. That was the problem with this generation. No respect for ghosts. How could Edgar live like that? Or whatever it was he was doing. He would have loved to blow out more candles, but there were strange bulbs of light, and though he was sure they wouldn't last, lacking grandeur and finesse, he was wrong. Luckily, several decades later, he discovered that if he ran his hands through them, the light would flicker. Unfortunately, everyone thought it was faulty wiring. One summer day, a group of men brought in strange grey boxes. This piqued Edgar's curiosity, but he was utterly confused. Later, Edgar learned that they were called cameras, but no matter how many papers he caused to fall slowly to the floor, how many doors he made creak, or how many light bulbs he made flicker, no one seemed to notice. But his time to shine finally came when one day a burglar entered the building. Edgar followed the man, making the doors creak behind him, whispering in his ear and making small objects float. When the man barged out of the school, screeching at the top of his lungs, Edgar could finally laugh heartily. The next day some people came to look at the cameras and finally saw his activity. Word spread quickly, and one late afternoon a group of students sat down in the library to discuss this new ghost. With nothing better to do, Edgar sat down next to them, hovering over the empty chair and listening to their conversation. "I bet the ghost just needs our help," a blonde girl said, tapping her closed math book with the tip of her pencil. "And I'm sure we can help her." There was a brief pause before a boy sitting next to her frowned. "How do you know it's a girl? Especially when I'm a man," Edgar murmured. A girl with a dark brown ponytail waved her hand near her ear as if trying to get rid of an annoying fly. "It doesn't matter," she said. "We just need to find out who they are and what they want." "I want to die, for good." The boy leaned forward. "What if the ghost is trying to kill everyone?" The blonde girl shook her head. "It's so she
or he."
The boy jumped in. The blonde girl rolled her eyes and continued. "Would have done something by now. The only moment when she
or he.
showed herself
or himself.
Stop that! The blonde girl glared at the boy. I don't think they want to hurt us, the brunette said. Maybe they didn't want to die. I assure you, I did. The brunette waved her hand near her ear again. Or maybe they haven't finished what they wanted to do while they were alive. Well, I wanted to drive the Duke mad, and I did do that, so I don't think that's it. Do you feel that draft? The brunette asked, looking around. The boy and the blonde girl shook their heads. Maybe they're afraid to leave, said the boy. Edgar threw up his hands in exasperation. Don't you think I tried to leave? Right after I died, I just couldn't. All right, I feel the draft too, the boy said, massaging his neck. He looked around shiftily before saying, let's go to McDonald's. They left a fuming Edgar behind. Arms crossed over his chest, he mulled over their words. Yes, he had wanted revenge on the Duke, but this was nearly 4 centuries ago. Now he just wanted to be done with it all. An idea dawned upon him. Curious, he floated to the front door of the palace. He had stopped trying to get through it after several years, long before the Duke even died. But now, perhaps that had changed once his revenge was complete. He took a deep breath just out of habit and pushed his way forward. There was a little resistance before it disappeared 2 seconds later, and he felt his chest pass seamlessly through the door. Suddenly Edgar saw a blinding light greeting him. He had to blink several times before he realized that he had just passed through the door and was now standing before a long tunnel with a bright light at the end. Faint harp music floated through the tunnel, filling his ears. He blinked, his surprise slowly turning to a deep frown. I could have just left, he shouted. Are you kidding me?